Hi, welcome to this training webinar on an introduction to integrated management systems. We're going to be talking about the methods and the benefits of integrating ISO 9001, 14001 and 45001. However, I should probably point out that there are many other standards within the ISO suite that can be integrated as well. One of the benefits we're going to talk about is saving effort, time, and be more efficient in the way we run our management systems. So when we talk about a management system, what do we mean? So it's what an organisation does to manage its processes and activities so that it can meet the requirements of its organisational objectives. And these may be whether you are a manufacturing or a service organisation. Effectively, you're looking to satisfy your customer requirements, comply with statutory and regulatory requirements, meet your internal objectives of driving improvement, and complying with set standards, just to name a few things. We want to be effective and efficient in how we do this. And in order to do that effectively, it's more efficient, more effective to systemize our activities so that we don't leave anything out, and also so we don't duplicate activities. Everyone should be clear about their responsibilities from within the management system, and that should include why you're doing certain things and why you should not do other things. So we have, in the case of this one, the 9001 standard talks about a quality management system, 14001 talks about an environmental management system, and 45001 talks about a health and safety management system. It's important to recognise here that these standards are guideline-based standards, so they will not tell you exactly what each organisation, your individual organisation, must do. What they do is they set a guideline of expectations of what's expected to manage these activities. It is important to recognise that there needs to be key competencies within each of these fields, not necessarily to manage the system always, but to have the competence to deliver certain aspects within the systems. So when we talk about integrating, what do we actually mean? Well, effectively what we mean is that there are a whole host of activities that are done within an individual management system, which are duplicated across all the different management systems. So effectively, if you were operating these in silo, in standalone activities, you could be duplicating much of the work that you need to be doing. And we'll go into that in greater detail later. This example just talks through not only health and safety, quality and environmental, but the ability to integrate also things like your compliance management system, food safety management system, information security, and so on. So the examples I'm talking about today are just three of the main standards that are used globally, but it doesn't restrict you, and it doesn't also mean that you have to have all three. I'm just using this as an example. So what are the real benefits of integrating? Well, they're all focused on a reduction in error. We want to reduce our waste, reduce our rework, reduce our scrap, our complaints, our costs. We want to minimise our environmental impact and minimise our health and safety incidents to as low as we possibly can get them. As well as that, some of the things we want to do is be more efficient and be more product driven in terms of our productivity. Well, if we're doing multiple things just to manage our management system and it's a duplication, we aren't really being very efficient even within our management system. So with these, integrating these, we can try and drive a greater level of motivation and cooperation within our business, try and drive a recognised message throughout the organisation of what the management system is there to achieve, rather than three different systems talking a similar language but maybe slightly differently. It could cause confusion when we communicate it. As well as that, if we have a a clear method of controlling our processes and activities across all of our required systems, and we integrate them, then many of the processes that we're talking about can be removed from the system. We can effectively have single processes or procedures that manage activities across the three standards. For example, documented information and the control of our records. Ideally, we can have a improved focus on opportunities for improvement across the business. And where possible, there is an emphasis on us trying to prevent problems rather than reacting and putting corrective actions in place. So one of the key areas that came about in the last 10 years from ISO was the introduction of Annex SL. Annex SL is effectively the template which ISO has used to develop their new ISO management system guidelines. What that basically means is any new standards that come out, they follow a certain structure of similarity. Previously to that didn't happen. So many organizations would have their management systems as a standalone, simply because it was very difficult to align them. With Annex SL, it's made that alignment much easier. Not only the alignment with the standards you have in place, but when you wish, if you did, to introduce another standard and maybe achieve another certification like information security when you already have quality, environmental and health and safety, it makes it a much simpler process because you already have a number of the key requirements from Annex SL. And in order for you to implement the new version of this standard that you want to bring about and have a management system updated to that, it makes it a simpler, more effective process, and it has a reduction in disruption within the business because the method and how it's delivered is very similar. So when we talk about Annex SL, we refer to a high-level structure. This is the clauses within the standard that's expected from ISO for you to follow and for you to demonstrate your effectiveness in running your management system. As we can see from here, there are a whole load of sub-clauses within the main clauses. There are 7 main clauses that have to be followed and demonstrated that you comply with. Of course, within those 7 clauses, there are sub-clauses, and many of them are very similar across all of the 3 standards that we're going to talk about today. So when we talk about our integration of our management systems, we want to ensure that when we talk about the different clauses like the context, the leadership, the planning elements, the support infrastructure, our operational activities, performance evaluation and improvement, these are all taken in the understanding of how they meet across quality, environment and health and safety, so that the message you're delivering from within your management system is one message. The other key thing I want to mention here is that if we develop our systems around the methodology of processes, when we talk about activities with inputs and outputs, if we use that methodology and how we map out our management systems, then we will very quickly see that areas associated to health and safety link very closely with environmental, for example, in our risk management and incident control. And of course, there are areas which cross over associated to, for example, health and safety and quality. If we take, for example, where there has been an incident and the root cause is identified as some human error, which has been driven by the fact that someone has forgotten to update a document or a risk assessment or a procedure, then effectively that comes back to how well our quality control is. So we can see how there's a very close link and connection between these standards. One of the things I always say when I'm talking to people or consulting people on integrated management systems is that if you start with a quality approach, then my belief is that you will have a more effective management system in place. So when we talk about the process approach, all of the three standards that we're referring to today still align themselves to the analogy of Plan, Do, Check, Act, or PDCA as it's often known. Planning and what it is you want to do, doing it, checking you've done it effectively, and act upon what you need to improve. Very simple, but very effective methodology. And this is used across all three of these standards. And of course, we've got different inputs and different activities that are required to do that. But if we use the consensus with the process approach and the PDCA, we can demonstrate a single method of how we deliver our management system activities and processes. And we've got to always remember as well, yes, there's got to be an effectiveness in how we deliver our activities within our business, but we must also remember there has to be an efficiency in how we do it. It's not about just delivering what we expect to deliver, but it's the method and how we deliver it so that we can be more efficient in the ability to be an effective organisation with a good management system that continually looks to drive improvement. So when we think about efficiency, we've got to think about reduction in error, reduction in waste, and of course that's across all standards, because if we have an incident in our environmental management or an accident in our health and safety management, then effectively that is a form of error. It's a form of causing an inefficient activity. And simply thinking about that, it means that we have to do other things within our business in order to correct the problems that have happened, but also to try to improve and learn from these mistakes so that we can be more efficient the next time round. So when we think about a joined up approach to this, we want to have one message again that's delivering how our management systems are going to function. Let's think about also risk-based thinking. Risk has always been around, and certainly in the environmental and health and safety management system standards, it's been around forever or a very long time. The analogy of risk, and particularly risk-based thinking within the quality management system standards, is fairly new in terms of how explicit it is. However, it is important to recognise that all three standards, including many other of the ISO standards, align themselves with risk-based thinking. So what is it that can cause harm to our business? So what is it? The concept of not achieving something we want to achieve effectively, delivering a project on time, meeting our clients' requirements, delivering on specification, delivering on price, not having error in our environmental systems, not causing leaks, not causing impact on our people. So all of these are things that we want to try and reduce based on risk. And effectively what we want to look at is what are the elements that could cause the most harm to our business. If we use that analogy across all three standards, again, we can deliver a very similar message to the people within our organisation that we want to embrace the management system. Because remember, being a person that runs a management system, it's not about you doing everything within the management system. It's about getting everyone involved and participating in the management system. It's about trying to communicate to everyone why we have this management system practices in place. And effectively, the best management systems we have are simply around the culture of the organisation. It's the way we do our business around here. So people see an openness and a fairness about stopping activities if they're unsafe, correcting things if they're unsure, making sure that where there is an error, they make other people aware of it. So if we have this culture of this is the way we do things around here, and we look to drive improvement and make people aware, then we can develop our risk-based thinking to help us along that journey. So the key points to consider about risk-based thinking is it's really about trying to prevent negative activity happening within our business. And to prevent negative activity happening, we want to be less reactive and more proactive in the activities that we undertake. So if our method of doing business and being proactive about risk and error, we can ultimately be more efficient in the way we run our business and learn from errors that do occur, because errors will occur. It's not about hiding those mistakes or trying not to communicate them. It's about raising awareness of them and learning from them. There are different methodologies in how we can go about identifying risk within our business. There is no one right or wrong way for your individual organisation. It's important, however, that you try and use a consensus approach from a quality and environmental and a health and safety approach. So whether it be using a 5x5 risk matrix or whether it be using terminology like low, medium, high, it's just important that the methodology and how it's delivered is consistent across the business. And of course, when we use things like risk registers for the management of risk within our organisation, it's important again that we use a similar methodology across the different aspects. It's even important to recognise that we can have a joined up approach in what our risk registers look like. There's nothing to say that we have to have separate quality and environmental and risk registers. It often makes life a little bit simpler in terms of reading the information, but it's important that the message that's delivered is in a similar way. When we talk about addressing risk within our processes, again, let's remember, in our business, when we undertake our activities, we don't break down quality and environmental and health and safety when we're on a job, when we're working in our production line, when we're buying material and receiving material in, or when we're subcontracting work to others. We don't break out quality, health and safety and environment. We try to deliver the best we can to meet those requirements as a whole. So it's the way we deliver our business activities. So if we use a process approach and think about the analogy of a process approach, then we can consider the risks associated to all the elements of our processes across quality, environment, and health and safety. So when we break down and think about the clauses of the 3 standards we're referring to now, there are so much duplication and similarity across them. Here we can see the main clauses across all 3 of the ISO standards that I'm referring to: the context of the organisation, leadership, planning, support, operations, performance and evaluation, and improvement. When we take the sub-clauses across all of the 3 standards and we lay them on top of one another, what we can see is the green boxes on this slide outlines the areas within the standards that meet all 3 of the ISO standards. So we can see there's quite a significant element across all 3 standards where we have to understand the needs and expectation of interested parties. We have to have our policies and our roles and responsibilities. We have to have our competence and awareness. We have to have our objectives, internal audit, management review, continual improvement. All of these things are across all 3 of the standards. So why would we look to manage them separately in silo? Wouldn't it be more efficient to manage them together? So have a management review meeting that covers all 3 elements. do our internal audits in such a way that we can be combining them together to look at quality, health, safety and environment throughout our processes. And when we look at our competence awareness and communication of our management systems, isn't it better to do that and communicate it in a joined up approach about quality, health and safety and environment together, rather than delivering those messages separately? Here also we have, with the yellow boxes, areas which are specific to 14,001 and 45,001. And as you can see, there are only 4 elements that jump out. Of course, there are some sub-elements that are different, but there are only 4 main elements that jump out in terms of identifying our compliance requirements under planning and the evaluation of our compliance under our performance and evaluation, and in operations, eliminating hazards and reducing risks, as well as our emergency preparedness and response. The blue boxes outline the areas that are specific to quality in 9001, which is more related to our operational activities. So our operational planning, our operational control of external products and services, our production, our release of our goods and services, and any non-conformances that happen within our production operations. So you can see lots of very clear areas of crossover that would be so much beneficial if we simply integrate our systems together. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take a little minute and I'm just going to jump out to a small area on an Excel spreadsheet and talk through So here we have a simple spreadsheet that outlines the clauses and sub-clauses of the ISO 9000, ISO 9001, 14001 and 45001 standards. And as we can see, we've broken them down into the 7 main clauses from context onwards, and we've identified the sub-clauses. The green areas, as mentioned, you can see very clearly are consistent across all 3 standards. There are some areas where the terminology that is used within the standard is slightly different. However, what is expected of the standard is very similar. These areas are identified in red, or in some cases, there are sub-clauses which we've not highlighted in any colour. And the simple reason for that is because the message that's being delivered across these 3 standards is identical, just slight difference in terminology. When I mention that, let's refer to clause 5.2 around the policies. So we have a quality policy, environmental policy, and an occupational health and safety policy. These are requirements of 5.2 across all 3 of the standards. We also have a 5.2.1 and a 5.2.2 within 9001 that talks about the establishment of the quality policy and the communicating of it. However, it is important to recognise that that is a key requirement within environment and health and safety as well. It's just not as explicitly identified within these sub-clauses, so we can see still the same similarities there. In the planning area of the standards associated to clause 6, we can see some specific areas which are additional requirements inside actions to address risks and opportunities, where in the environmental standard it's looking for environmental aspects and compliance obligations, and within health and safety it's looking for the hazard identification, assessment of risk, and determination of our legal compliance requirements, a little bit like compliance. So when we look at these sections, there are actions to address risks, particularly focused on opportunity when it refers to quality, and particularly focused on environmental aspects and health and safety on the other 2 standards. But if we use a similar methodology in how we undertake these assessments and deliver our results and message, we have a very consistent approach to that. Some of the key areas that are slightly different are focused more within the areas of operation. When we look at the areas of operation, we have certain requirements associated to emergency preparedness and response from an environmental point of view and a health and safety point of view, which are only in the 14,001 and 45,001. And then we have some key elements in our operations about eliminating hazards and reducing risks, and our management of change and management of procurement associated to health and safety. But we have a significant number of areas within our quality management standard, quality management system, which are specifically focused on 9001 only, around the management of our production and our processes, about the management of design, and so on and so forth. Then in the performance evaluation, we see again consistent requirements across each of them, with two main significant differences. Well, three actually. One is that there's an expectation of getting customer satisfaction, understanding within the quality management system, and evaluation of our compliance requirements in performance evaluation on 14,001 and 45,001. And the third one is it explicitly talks about analysis and evaluation within 9001. But of course, we want to analyze and evaluate all of our performance associated to health and safety, environment, and quality. It's just not explicitly drawn out in all of the standards the same way it is in 9001. But the method and how we analyze based on our objectives, what we need to monitor and measure, our incidents, near misses, etc., we want to be able to do the same thing, because ultimately what we want to use this data for is to drive our improvements within our business. Internal auditing is pretty much the same across the business with the three standards, as is management review, and as is the requirement to drive improvement. So jumping back to the slides here, we're going to talk through a little bit about the different clauses and how simple they are to integrate. So clause 4, in terms of the context of the organisation, where we're looking to understand the organisation, its context, identifying external and internal issues, what the needs and expectations are of our interested parties, our workforce, and what the needs are, what they expect from us in terms of our internal and external and interested parties, and the scope of our documented management system, and considering what elements are important to us within our business as we basically build the scope of our system and how it's going to meet various requirements. This is no different across all three standards. The context is looking for us to demonstrate how we identify our internal and external issues, what those may be, and what the expectations are from our interested parties. And of course, when we talk about external and internal issues, they will be common in some areas across organisations, like in terms of legal requirements, in terms of how we manage technical changes, but there will be also areas which are very specific to an individual's organisation. And then when we talk about our expectations and needs of our interested parties, we have to consider again what is specific to our business, our customers, the way we operate, how we operate, the area, geographics, etc. So we have to be able to identify what those are and document them across all three standards, and similar with the scope. And when we think about internal and external issues, we have to look at whether they drive some of our objectives as well within the business, and whether we need to report information back to our internal and external issues and interested parties. So there's some consistent methods and consistent areas that we have to focus on across all businesses, but there are also key areas that are very specific to our business alone and the products and services that we offer. And those are the areas that we have to drill down to and understand in more detail how we can develop the context of what our management system is, specifically to our business. The IMS itself, in terms of the 3 standards, if it was the 3 standards or more, is we have to demonstrate how we establish, implement, review and maintain the integrated management system, and importantly, the method and how we improve on that system. And you will see as we go through the different clauses here, there's a cyclic approach to the message and the method of how the different clauses work and feed into one another. So, in order to have an effective management system and an integrated management system across a whole organisation, whether that be a large group with different businesses or whether that be an SME type organisation, we still need a level of leadership within that. So we need our leadership to commit to meeting the requirements of the system, to commit to getting communication and awareness out associated to the system, commit to the policies that will drive the direction of what the organisation is looking to do. And of course, they have to commit to the roles, responsibilities and authorities of what they want to get from the business. Yes, these must align themselves with what the business activities are and not be these standalone specific things just for ISO. But it's important to recognise that many of the elements of the ISO standards should blend in with the business activities that you undertake. And then, of course, as part of our leadership commitment, we want to have participation and consultation with our workforce and our key suppliers or contractors. What is it that they need from us? How can we assist them? And how can we get information back to help drive improvement? So there are many bits of information out there about what makes a good leader and what makes a good commitment from a leader. And it's important to recognise that when we refer to a leader, we don't necessarily mean the managing director or the CEO of the business. We're referring to people that have these leadership awareness, leadership cultural understanding of how they can use and influence their ability to influence others, regardless of the position they hold, whether they are, trainers in the business, whether they are supervisors, whether they are managers, or whether they are just seen as leaders in terms of their ability to get people to follow what you want. So it could be individuals that are just a colleague working on a production line, but they seem to get it and they seem to encourage people to commit to the management system. That shows good leadership skills. Of course, there's got to be an element of focusing on customers, developing our policies, and developing the roles and responsibilities and authorities. So they have to recognise that individuals within the business have got certain requirements that they must follow, and this may fall back to job descriptions, how the policies and objectives flow down through into individual roles. And ultimately what you're looking for is get everyone on the same journey, going in the same direction. And if we start from a leadership point of view down through the organisation, we can start to develop that. We then move into planning. So we've got our context of what it is that we do and how our system's going to look. We've got our commitment from leaders, our communication activities, and then we want to be able to demonstrate how we plan to address the key areas. And importantly, this is focused mainly on risk. So we want to look at how we take actions to address our risks and opportunities. Again, this is across all 3 standards. So we're looking at our risks associated to health and safety, risks associated to our environmental aspects and impacts, and risks associated to our quality and opportunity activities. So remember, In many cases, where there has been an incident or an accident, it may be that this might come back that some of our quality approach are contributing factors in the fact that these incidents or accidents have occurred. So it's important to recognise that we have a joined up approach in how we address these, and importantly, how we try and identify what those hazards are and control those risks so that we are reacting, so that we are proactive and not reacting. The ideal scenario is that, of course, we have to react in some cases, but the more proactive we are, the more communication we have, the more that people recognise that we want to take actions to address risks and opportunities, then the more proactive we can be and minimise the requirement to be reactive, because hopefully we will be a business which is more focused on efficiency and effectiveness. Our actions to address our risks and opportunities, again, I mentioned the method that's done. Each individual organisation would have their own methodology. However, it is important to recognise in terms of the risk assessment methodology, you may want to look at some of our other videos on YouTube or on LinkedIn that talk about good practice and 5 steps and how you would go about doing that. Key message here is that you try and use a consistent method and the message delivered throughout the organisation is the same. Compliance obligations, they're specifically focused on 14,001 and 45,001. So what is it you have to comply with? So first of all, you need to identify what your compliance needs are and how they are applicable to you. So this is looking at the standards, the legal requirements, obligatory codes of conduct, etc. How applicable are they to your business? Which areas need more attention than other? And how you're going about to be able to meet the requirements of them. And then, of course, we've got objectives and how we want to achieve them. This is across our whole business. Now, if our objectives is about reducing error, reducing waste within our business, being more efficient in how we deliver things, why would we do this on a standalone management system? 3 different methods of looking at what objectives we're going to set and how we're going to achieve them. Very often using a joined up approach to setting objectives and driving improvement on them will be much more beneficial, much more efficient, and send a much better message to what it is that we're trying to achieve as a business. When we think about changes as well in a business, we've got to be able to plan for those changes. Now, those changes could have impact on risk associated to health and safety, environment, quality, and of course, other business activities. So it's important that we use a consistent method of managing and planning for changes. So if we use that consistent method across our integrated system, then we can look to see and have people involved when we're delivering changes. So where we have people that are maybe more involved in health and safety, others in environment, others in quality, we can have a consistent message. Do we believe this change is having any impact in these areas? And rather than focusing in one area, doing it as a joined up way will be a more efficient way of managing changes and hopefully controlling them in a more consistent way. Getting into support, where we're talking about our resources, our competence, our awareness and communication, and how our documented information is managed, you can see very clearly here, this is a requirement across all areas, all 3 standards. So in our resources, we need to have our people, our infrastructure, our environment, how we monitor and measure activities, our organisational knowledge, what equipment we have, what vehicles, the training, and so on and so forth. So when we think about that and we break it down in a little bit more detail, competence is a key area. But of course, competence is a requirement that would meet the needs of environmental management, health and safety management, and quality management, amongst many other areas in terms of financial management, customer care, etc., etc. So we would want to demonstrate that we have competence across all of our business. So again, why would we look to manage our competence in silo in these three separate management systems specifically to health and safety, environment and quality? We would just simply use a method of competence management across the whole organisation, and therefore there's a consistent approach to how we do that. The same with awareness and communication. Why would we deliver message about complying with the requirements of the management system in three different ways? Use a joined up approach from an IMS point of view, from top down, and share awareness and communication amongst each of us within our business. Remember, a good integrated management system is one that everyone works with, and it becomes part of the way we do business around here. So that methodology of it's just part of the way we do business, it means it's not a, oh, we better go and do the quality thing or the health and safety or the environmental thing. It's focused specifically on this is the way we do our business. This is the way our operations are delivered in a consistent method so that it complies with the requirements of the standard, but importantly so that it demonstrates how your business delivers its activities, its processes, its products in a consistent method. Our documented information. Why would you do it differently? Why would you control it differently? Again, it's the same methodology across all three standards. When we do get into the operations section, there are significant differences in here associated to 9001, 14001 and 45. There's much more emphasis in operations around 9001 in most of the areas. So there are areas around operational planning and control. So it's how we go about controlling our operations and bringing them on. Of course, we have understanding of the elements of hazard and reducing risk associated to our occupational health and safety and our environmental practices. And the recommendation here is that we use our hierarchy of controls and how that's done. We then have our requirements for our products and services. So what do we need in order to be able to deliver what we do? What do we do in terms of handling our complaints, handling our customer property, and so on and so forth? And we also have a key elements here around 14001 and 45 about emergency preparedness and response. But of course, if you use a consistent quality approach to this in terms of how you document your information, how you share the information, how you train and make people competent and aware of what you have to do in the case of an emergency. And of course, an emergency is different to every organisation. It could be simple office-based emergency to do with fire, or it could be very significant in high-risk areas of business. They've got to be specific to your organisation. Well, there's a whole element then within the design and development, which is very specific to 9001. And then we've got externally provided products and services, which is much more specific to 9001, but also has to recognise that you may be bringing additional risk associated to environment and health and safety into your organisation. So the management of your controlling your products, externally provided products and services, is critical across all three standards. Then you've got your production and service provision, which is how you go about delivering your business activities and what things you need to be doing in terms of calibrations, certifications, monitoring activities, any characteristics that are specific to your organisation and your products and services. But of course, it does again look at what the risks are associated to your business. So again, it's looking across all three areas. So it could be in terms of handling, packaging, storage, how we deliver and distribute material, we've got to look about it across the whole area. And then our release of our products and services. And, you know, these are generally much more quality related in terms of how we deliver our services and what's expected from our customers, or a level of compliance requirement, or an external assessor requirement. And then, of course, if we have problems, if we have non-conformances within our operational activities, our production line, our service delivery, wrong parts, failing parts, things that fail after our production line and after we have sent them or delivered them, things that go wrong specific to our business, it's the method and how we control them and how we manage them to minimize the impact as much as possible. And that's much more 9001 specific. When we look at our performance evaluation, this really is a clean sweep across all three standards in terms of we need to understand what we monitor, measure, and analyze. So we have to decide for our business, our customers, our regulatory requirements, what it is that we have to do inside our business in terms of what we monitor, measure, and evaluate. And often these are driven down from objectives that we set ourselves in terms of reducing error, improving on certain activities that we do, maybe making more money for the business. But it's about how we go about doing it, which we've set up at the planning stage. And now this is how we analyze that data, how we take that information to identify, have we achieved what we wanted to achieve in terms of our business practices, but also in terms of our objectives and what we wanted to achieve. And of course, the result of doing this monitoring measurement is we want to see how we can analyze the information and evaluate it to make changes, drive improvements. So this is really important across all three of the standards, because is there anything that's driving us in terms of an environmental or a health and safety that we want to see and drive improvement? So it might be related to near-miss reporting, or observations, safety observations, or incident management, or our environmental impact assessments. This information should be driving us through an evaluation process so that ultimately we go to improve what we do. Clearly, our evaluation of compliance is very specific to 14,001 and 45, associated to our legal obligations and our compliance requirements that we identified previously, that we had to know what those were. And they're very specific to each organisation. But we have to then understand how often we evaluate them and what action we take to address them or maintain them. And of course, we have internal auditing across all three standards. If we use a process and risk-based approach to our internal auditing, and you may want to look at another video we did about the method of risk-based internal auditing that will provide you with some assistance. Taking that approach in an integrated fashion is a much more efficient, much more effective way of undertaking our internal audits. And remember, internal audits is not about tick box. It's not about just doing it because your external certification auditor asked you to do. It's about having a consistent way of monitoring, measuring, and improving on what we do. So your internal audits really should be seen as an improvement activity. Of course, it may be that you catch issues that are going on, where there are problems associated to communication and awareness, or areas around compliance. But one of the key elements is really about driving improvement. And our management review process really is a consistent way of taking this at a higher level to understand what it is that our management system is doing for us, and where we're seeing areas of concern that may need management support to help us drive these changes. And last but not least, of course, is our improvement area. Why else would we have our integrated management systems if we weren't looking to improve? You've put investment Your organisation has put investment of time and money into having these systems in place. And yes, of course, often you will have a certificate of some third-party organisation that says that you meet a certain requirement. And that's great, because it can help you win business, it can help you tender for work, etc. But let's think about it. Wouldn't you rather get a return on that investment, not just the certificate? So driving improvement through an organisation, and organisations and people that have effective integrated management systems are able to consistently show a return on that investment, whether that be a reduction in incidents, whether that be an improvement on the number of non-conformances, whether that be an improvement on the number of customer complaints, whether that be that they are more effective and more efficient at delivering their services or manufacturing their products based on a continual drive to improve. Ultimately, the message of looking at the improvement processes within Clause 10 is across all three standards. What areas can we improve on, and what ultimately will it drive improvement around? And of course, you can have different ways of driving improvement. These improvement areas can come from errors that have occurred. They can come from actions that you've ultimately had to put in place urgently, maybe based on incidents or near misses. Or they can be a general improvement or a general drive based on objectives, based on observations and different types of awareness and communication. The key thing here is that we must not forget about the improvement clause across all three of the standards. Ultimately, we want this to drive our business and drive the culture of our business forward so that we can show a return on our investment, of everyone's investment, of having this integrated management system that ultimately, as it matures, it's the way we do our business. So thanks very much for taking the time to listen to this video. May I say again, if you could subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on LinkedIn. Thank you.